Welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman. I am the Washington Outsider's editor-in-chief. Today with us is Ksenia Svetlova. She is a former Israeli MP for the Zionist Union from 2015, a journalist, analyst, and now she's a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Ksenia just recently came back from Morocco, where she attended the N7 conference, and we'll talk more about it in a minute. What we'll be discussing today, a very major development, and it's not Morocco's amazing performance in the World Cup, but another different role that Morocco is playing, which is that it's also the first African country to be providing military aid to Ukraine per an agreement with the United States. And we'll talk about this effort due to Ksenia's involvement in Ukraine-related issues and the context. Before we begin, Ksenia, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your research, your work, and of course the conference that you just attended.
Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you so much for this privilege to being on your show. So a little bit about me. I was born in Moscow, and my family immigrated to Israel when I was a teenager. So I grew up in Jerusalem. I studied Middle Eastern studies, and I was an Arab affairs correspondent for Channel 9, Israeli channel in Russian language for many years. And in 2015, I was elected to office in the Zionist Union alliance. It was back then the opposition to the Likud and Netanyahu's party. I was sitting in the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, as well as Aliyah and Absorption. I think both of them have the most strategic relevance and importance to Israel, of it being, of course, country of immigrants. In my current work in the Atlantic Council and also in the Institute of Mitvim, it's an Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policy. I focus on both Abraham Accords, the presence of Russia and its activities in the Middle East, as well as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Well, that all sounds fascinating and difficult. Abraham Accords had an amazing impact, but of course, there's also a lot more work to do. There's been a concern about insufficient people-to-people engagement, not so much on the part of Israelis, but on their Arab counterparts, particularly in UAE. With Morocco, there's more of a relationship due to historic and cultural ties, but in the Gulf, we're still seeing a bit of a struggle. And the Israeli president had visited Bahrain recently. There's also been a visit to UAE precisely to address this issue. And the N7 conference in Morocco also touches on that. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
Yes, thank you for this question. Well, the N7 conference that was dedicated to the issues of education, which is, of course, key to everything, key to normalization, key to understanding of each other. So basically, our task, along with our colleagues that came from all N7 countries, this is the concept that developed after the Negev Forum Summit of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs that took place in Israel roughly 8 months ago. The only country that at that time did not send representation was Jordan, but after that it did join the format and agreed to continue consultations. The next round of these consultations is scheduled for January 9 in Abu Dhabi. I do not know if it really will take place. We still do not have a government in Israel. And we do not know who will take the office in the end of the day of the Foreign Affairs and also Ministry of Education. Everything is vague. In any case, our task as the supporters of N7 and as the experts on education, normalization, and coexistence was to give our common recommendations to the respective governments in terms of changing the curricula, working out some extra curriculum activity for the students from the N7 countries to get them together, to introduce them to each other, to talk about things that connect between us, but also about things that divide us, because this is not a less important task. Yeah, I can tell you that during the conference, which was also honored by the president of the American ambassador in Morocco, we also touched the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And since you mentioned the Mondial and the amazing performance of Morocco, I was there when they beat Portugal, and it was like unbelievable. The celebrations just went out all night. But we also remember that the Moroccan team raised the Palestinian flag. So even if it seems from the Israeli perspective, as we already live in some kind of past conflict, past Israeli-Palestinian conflict reality, this is really not the case when you talk to your peers in the Arab countries, and it was evident during the Mondial, of course. So it will be an interesting challenge right now with the new Israeli government to really see how it all develops and how the N7 partners will react to the domestic Israeli developments. Meaning, of course, that the upcoming of the right now is what it seems the most right-wing Israeli government in a long, long time.
Indeed, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict still has a great deal of sentimental concern for Arab populations who, for decades, have been educated and indoctrinated, one could say, to believe that it's the central of conflicts in the Middle East. But now, with the proliferation of civil wars and conflicts affecting Arab populations in the Middle East, from Yemen, Syria, the situation in Iraq, and of course the treatment of the quasi-Arabs by Iran, one would think that at the very least, in addition to the Palestinian cause, they would also be expressing support for the civilians in those countries. I'm curious to see that there is still not of the elevation of these issues, and the Palestinian issue remains the only humanitarian and political concern on a popular level. So whether
I'm not very much surprised about this because, as we saw in Qatar, you were really not allowed to bring flags of the countries that do not participate in Mondial,
Mhm.
except Palestine. Okay, this issue is truly it's emotional issue. It's not the only issue on the agenda, and yet I can tell you that since the government also, some governments also kind of channel their citizens and the guests to express their support to specifically Palestinian, issue, and not to, for example, the people of Syria or people of some other country that are suffering from dictatorship and are being slaughtered right now. Therefore, for example, you saw in Qatar much more Palestinian flags than you did of, for example, I don't know, Ukrainian flag. Although I'm pretty sure that there were people who wanted to wage the Ukrainian flag and to show solidarity, at least from the Western world. But they were not allowed to do this, to do so. So the visibility indicates on many issues. First of all, the conflict it's not over; it's there, and it's going actually now to the very dangerous stage of tension and perhaps another wave of terrorism that can erupt at any time here in Israel. The second issue is, of course, the interest of specific countries. Qatar is, of course, a very clear case of this. The country wants to wage this issue among all else and to show that it's still a partisan of the Palestinian struggle. Well, then of course you will see more visibility to supporters of the Palestinian case and the Palestinian flags.
And of course, we have seen this surprise by many Israelis because, on the one hand, the World Cup has allowed Israel and Qatar to establish short-term engagement over logistics concerning the games and military and security cooperation. But on the other hand, Qatar has played up the Palestinian issue. It has not taken any action to prevent harassment of Israeli journalists. And of course, it has gone back on a number of its promises it used to encourage people to attend the games, including cooked kosher food and public prayer. So we are seeing that at the very least, Qatar is very good at using PR to generate attention, but not necessarily so great in following up on its promises. And as for terrorism, we have seen disturbing escalation in Israel in recent months. And unfortunately, we do not see any political movement from the international community to put pressure on those who support extremism. In the meantime, getting back to Morocco, Morocco is playing a very interesting role because on the one hand, Morocco is the head of the Al-Quds group, and it has been at the forefront of providing humanitarian aid to the Palestinians through the years. On the other hand, it's got a very strong historical connection with Israel, and we have seen that both Moroccan Jews and local Arabs have been celebrating Morocco's victory on the ground in Israel. Um, Perhaps the types of celebrations were a little bit different, with Moroccan Jews just basically hanging out in bars, and there's been some incidents with the police in some of the Arab areas. But nevertheless, the spirit was definitely there. So Morocco is in this geopolitical situation where it's got credibility with both sides, and we have not seen effort from the Palestinians to kind of disassociate from Morocco on the basis of their relations with Israel, the way we have seen a backlash against the UAE, in particular, and to a lesser extent, Bahrain. Um, the question is, of course, can Morocco channel that in a balanced direction to prevent accusations of bias, as we have seen at the games, and but at the same time to kind of use it to bring closer to bring the parties closer together. We have seen that Morocco played an intermediary role earlier this summer with the Allenby Bridge negotiations. Do you think it will continue playing that diplomatic role?
Well, Morocco quietly plays a diplomatic role of a quiet mediator for many years now. And it had attempted numerous times also to diffuse the tensions on Temple Mount, although we know that, according to the international law, Jordanians, of course, has the full prerogative on the Temple Mount, and the Jordanian king is the custodian. However, the Moroccans quietly, in their own way, in the way that they know very well how to handle themselves without stepping on toes of other people, they know how to contribute, to better understanding, to diffuse tensions, and this is what they're doing for many years. So this is why I believe that the Moroccan king and his leadership, they receive more support perhaps from the Palestinian side. And they have been accepted in a way that, yes, unfortunately, the Gulf states are not accepted here, especially in the West Bank. So Morocco gained its credibility. It has an ability to talk and to pass messages, and also sometimes to reach agreements, as what we saw with the United States in regards to the Allenby crossing. I believe it's not the last that we're going to hear from Morocco in this regard. And I can tell you that Andrea Azoulay, the renowned Jewish advisor of the king, that is serving in this position for dozens of years, who also addressed the N7 participants in Rabat, he mentioned with this full hope that the Israeli-Palestinian issue will come, to some better stage, to some better position, and there was some solution will be found to that. So Morocco is in this place to tell both of the parties, Palestinians and Israelis, from the position of power and confidence. Listen, you need to get closer to each other. You need to work it out to prevent another wave of violence, which could be catastrophic, certainly for the Palestinians, but of course also for the Israelis. Blood will be spilled. Who needs it? So I think that Morocco is right now doing its best as a chairman of the Al Quds group also to prevent from these pressures to erupt, especially in Jerusalem. So this was something that you clearly heard in the voices of many officials that spoke during the committee, because it is, it's all very well when we sit and we draft these recommendations together, but if tomorrow Jerusalem will erupt with violence, then there will be no good of any of the work that was done. And this is, of course, not the purpose at all.
Well, besides this important engagement and besides this effort to prevent further escalations and to push for better peace building infrastructure, Morocco has also an expanded geopolitical and diplomatic role as a country located in the crossroads of three regions: Africa, the Middle East, and Europe, and having cultural and language and historical connections to all three. In recent years, it has taken steps to integrate itself further in Africa. So not only is it the first Arab country to reach the semifinals, but it's also the first African country to do so. And it has been playing up this African angle and engaging with various African countries in a more high-profile way. But in addition to all of that, it has also been the first country to recognize the United States as a new country. So the history of U.S. Morocco relations, especially defense relations, goes back a very long time. And now we are seeing that these relations are starting to elevate beyond just U.S. Recognition of the Moroccanness of the Western Sahara, and but also we are seeing that besides the annual military exercises between Morocco, US, and a host of other countries that Morocco is now playing a more clear diplomatic role through the US. And this delivery of T-72 parts to Ukraine is the first such example. To my knowledge, it's the first MENA country to respond to this call. US has been trying to negotiate the delivery of these parts with a number of allies, and in particular in the Middle East and North Africa. Can you tell us how that came about and why Morocco, out of everyone, is the first one to respond positively to this effort?
So, first of all, I have to say that technically, the Royal Moroccan Armed Forces, they have the possession of several dozens of these tanks of T-72, T-72 BK type, and they were acquired in the end of the 90s from Belarus. So, this is the karma for you, yes? The Belarus, of course, is a dictatorial country that is known for selling weapons to basically whoever demands them. So now this weapon will be making the full circle and going back to Eastern Europe, but this time, of course, to Ukraine. Back in 2015, the Ukrainian public company Ukr Service asked Morocco for spare parts for its T-72 tanks. So there was a precedent for working, Kiev working with Rabat on this issue. But of course, what happens now is that, I think this is a great achievement of American foreign policy to involve with Morocco. The relations between Washington and Rabat in the last 2 years since Abraham Accords, since the accord specifically, it is a separate accord between Morocco and Israel. They are growing fast. They are developing in a very good way, where there is a positive dynamic. And I think that this agreement, while every weapon that arrives Kiev is important, it's at the same time we understand that it's not a game changer. Yet at the same time, I think that what is unique about this is the strength of the American foreign policy that we are talking about. This is the first African and the first Arab country that goes open and supplies weapon of this kind to Ukraine. It might not be the last country, but I think why Morocco was the first is because basically because of the strength of its relations with DC. And while America goes out of its way to help the Ukrainians and also to pressure other countries to do the right thing for Ukraine, we are talking about building credit for years, for many years to come. This is, by the way, something that is slowly but also happens in Israel, that was extremely reluctant to even discuss the issue of supplying weapons. And as we read in Haaretz report a couple of months ago, apparently supplied some, it was called defense elements to Ukraine, also under the pressure of the United States. We do not know exactly what these elements are, but something that was included in the report that they cost a few $1 million. So we are talking about something that is very substantial. So the war goes on, and war needs weapons, as we well understand. So I think that the United States will keep pressuring many countries, as well as many countries, to do the right thing for Ukraine. Morocco is there, and I can tell you that we'll enjoy certainly the credit of the goodwill of the United States on many other issues, whether it's regional issues, economic support that Morocco needs today so much. The economy is not doing wonders this day, and the recession is obvious. It's coming to many countries in the world, specifically to MENA region. And you can only say, good work, US, good work, Morocco.
Interestingly, speaking of crisis, Morocco has been one of the few countries that can provide the alternative to the fertilizer shortage that we are finding ourselves with as a result of the war. Um, so that has not been nearly played up, but that is one of the advantages that they have. But on the other hand, food, other things are expensive and difficult, and we can see that all of the developing countries have been hit very hard from that perspective, and the situation is not likely to ease up anytime soon due to a proliferation of assorted economic crisis, energy, agricultural, and so forth. But there is another element here that brings Israel and Morocco closer both together to each other and to Ukraine, which is the fact that Russia and Iran have made a very comfortable alliance, which has only grown over the years. And now, first of all, both Russia and Iran back some of the same actors that each country finds a threat. Russia has been closely aligned with Algeria and South Africa, which are now, from everything I'm hearing, are providing various types of support for the Russian invasion. And Iran has been very close to those two countries as well, and has been training, arming through Hezbollah, Polisario, a separatist group closely affiliated to Algeria that has attacked Morocco repeatedly in recent years with increasingly more sophisticated weapons. So we are seeing Iran's involvement and its use of various conflicts for its own interest to weaken pro-Western states. And that is also apparently the reason that's helping shift the mindset inside Israel, as Russia is losing ground in Syria and becoming weaker. Iran is gaining from that. Is gaining ground, is gaining strength, and is gaining political acumen from selling weapons to Russia. Where do we see all of this going? Morocco's interest in this matter, Israel's security interest, and the larger geopolitical picture as a result of this alliance.
Well, I believe that even prior to the war in Ukraine, the strife of Iran to hegemony in the region was a fear factor for many countries, not only Israel. However, Israel was definitely the most threatened country, directly threatened by Iran and by its murderous regime. Now, when everything is, became very crystal clear, in regards to Syria. And by the way, many Israeli experts never had any illusion that Russia is about to banish Iran from Syria. There were just no such illusions. We knew that they were working in layers. The upper layer is Russia and its air force that was pounding Syria and destroying its cities. And the down layer is, of course, Iran with its militias, Hezbollah and Zainabiyun, Fatemiyun, and all of the other murderous groups that are working in Syria. Whether Russia is strong or not, Iran is about to remain in Syria for many years. It's building there its infrastructure, and it now has a powerful base in the Arab Middle East, and it's found itself much closer to many countries in the region, specifically Jordan. Jordan feels much more threatened by Iran today than it ever had before in the past. And it's very vocal about it, So you have another member to this anti-Iranian camp in the Arab Middle East and Israel, of course, and Morocco. Yes, due to also the armament that is coming for years now. It's not a new thing that they receive some training and support from Iran and Hezbollah, in the Western Sahara. But also I think about because of the this very clear change in the camps in the Middle East. You have you now have to choose basically. Yes, this is something of the countries are being a little bit slow to do or reluctant to do because they still think that you can play basically yes with both of the countries, but you really can't due to this unusual circumstances of Putin's war against Ukraine. You can be neither in Russian camp or in American camp. You cannot really be in both. I think that more countries in the MENA region will find out the difficult way. That Russia is not friend of them. Russia is being cooperating with Iran forever. They did not always see eye to eye on everything. This is correct. Sometimes they also compete. Sometimes they also have grudges among each other. But it doesn't mean a thing in regards to Russia's commitment to any of the Arab countries here in the region. So I think that for Morocco, it clearly says that they do not believe to Russia. And not so long ago, the Russian spokesperson of the foreign ministry, Maria Zakharova, expressed hope that the countries that will win in the Mondial would not be from the enemy camp. And then she meant that Argentina and Morocco. Okay, so now would probably we have to wipe out, Morocco also, because Morocco also basically agreed to supply weapons to Ukraine. So I think that this was the right decision. This is the decision that also needs to be done also by Israel and also by some other countries here in the region that are being considered partners of the United States for many years, and they do belong in the American camp. Certainly not in the Russian camp. I know that although there were hopes, for example, in Saudi Arabia, for commercial cooperation, economic cooperation with Russia, if you look at the MOUs that were signed in 2015 during the visit of King Salman to Moscow, then you see that not much of this realized in the end of the day. And the same is with Egypt, so the same is with the Emirates. So I think that in the end of the day, Morocco sets an example here very bravely, very boldly, and let's hope that also the rest of the Middle East will come to the same conclusion in the end of the day.
We should also remember a very recent incident involving a prisoner exchange, which included a number of Americans, British citizens, but also a Moroccan who were all captured in Ukraine. A number of Moroccans have studied in Ukraine as well as in Russia and have married to local citizens. That did not prevent Russia, the fact that some of the Moroccans live in Russia, from capturing one person in Ukraine and actually threatening to execute him. That was followed by Morocco's private entreaties from that person's family members until eventually that exchange mediated by Saudi Arabia successfully concluded. But we should certainly remember that Russia will have no sentimental value in anybody from anywhere, even if they had, financial interests in those countries previously. They will not hesitate to do what they think they want to do, what they want to do with them, no matter what background they are from.
Yeah.
That brings us now to kind of an awkward situation right now, because as you have said, Russia has tried to approach a number of Middle Eastern countries. They have had a legal agreement with Israel regarding the situation in Syria and regarding all of this. Do you think this recent agreement by Israel to provide those materials, whatever they were, is going to disrupt that agreement? And if so, what would that look like?
You can never, of course, know how Russia can react to various steps and various actions. However, it seems to me that Russia is not in the position today to, let's say, open another front in the Middle East in the midst of the war that it's obviously losing on the ground in Ukraine, to open now a front against Israel and Syria, to violate the terms of agreement that basically serves everybody, because we are talking about de-escalation, cooperation for de-escalation that is good for the Russians, just as it is good for the Israelis, to prevent from planes being shut down and tragedies happening in the air. All of the threats that are being made in regards to Israel since the beginning of the year, and we heard them even before the war erupted in 24th of February. There were flights over the Golan Heights, and there was display with the GPS signal to try to make the Israeli activity of Israeli radars go a little bit weaker. This all happened in January, for example, right? Yes, the Russians would prefer that Israel would certainly, be neutral, or even take pro-Russian side. I think this was something that expected before the war. Since it didn't happen this way, I think that now there is this perhaps belief that the new government, that it was not sworn yet, it's not formed yet, but I think that there is, in the end of the day, there will be a government led by Benjamin Netanyahu, whom Putin knows very well. I think that there is some hope that perhaps Netanyahu, even if will not be overtly pro-Russian, then he perhaps will be more neutral than Lapid. Then I think certainly now, when there is this time of waiting to whatever will happen in Jerusalem, Russia is inclined not to worsen their relations. And you can see it clearly with this sham trial of the Jewish agency in Moscow, that's been postponed time after time. It was postponed and again, and nothing really, happens in this regard. The Jewish agency is now, of course, being crippled, and it cannot work out its educational programs as it used to do before. But at the same time, they could just close it by the court order, and that would be the end of that. They are not doing it because they are waiting for this Netanyahu government. I think that they're about to, again, it will be unpleasant surprise because no government, Netanyahu or not Netanyahu, in Israel today, will be able to, or willing to go against the international sanctions, the financial restrictions, and Israel follows them in a meticulous way, even though it doesn't have sanctions of its own. I think that there is some time right now that Russia is willing to give to the formation of the government and the new government to come. And then I think we're about to see perhaps more of its reaction. It will be almost 1 year of the war. And let's see how things will develop. But I do not expect that even Netanyahu's government will do something in a different way in regards to its relations with Russia than the previous Lapid and Bennett government did. I do expect that Netanyahu might try to mediate again between Zelensky and Putin. He might do that. In the end of the day, he knows very well Putin, but he also maintains decent ties with Zelensky. So this is something that perhaps we can expect.
Well, in the meantime, Russia has certainly tried to exploit the differences over this issue among the various Middle Eastern countries. With Morocco, it probably will not have much success, but it has tried to exploit the differences between UAE and Saudi Arabia, for instance, with UAE being much more welcoming to the financial transactions and infusions from the fleeing oligarchs, whereas Saudi Arabia, while it has played a diplomatic role so far has not been particularly enthusiastic. It has a long history of economic rivalry with Russia within OPEC Plus, and it's specifically, the Russian Qatari propaganda machine has accused the crown prince of trying to cozy up to Putin. In reality, he had significant tensions over economic issues and oil prices in the past. So I don't really see that happening, but I do see Russia trying to actually exploit the differences between the neighbors and their competition and tensions in its own interests. How do you see that playing out? U.S. has been struggling with maintaining positive relations in the Gulf. Its relationship with Netanyahu, specifically between Biden, not the U.S. as a whole, and Netanyahu is not expected to be overly cordial, but of course the strong relationship overall will remain. But we are seeing these tensions. What can happen as a result of this, as a result of Biden's commitment to the pursuit of the nuclear deal with Iran and these other geopolitical issues in light of the administration's goals in Ukraine?
Well, yeah, I think that with every rocket that is being sent from Iran to the battlefield in Ukraine, the probability of signing the nuclear deal is diminishing. If the goal of the Iranians was to provoke the U.S. in some way, so they succeeded in this. They provoked enough to basically to take the nuclear deal almost off the table. It's not off the table completely,
Mhm.
and yet stuck to the in this situation. I think its most eager supporters admit that there is not much room for any negotiations and for any developments. I don't think that the Iranians completely understood till the end the results, of their actions. If they did, it clearly means that they are not about to sign any agreement with any American administration whatsoever, and they have just one goal in mind: to keep the cards open and to continue, growing the nuclear capabilities slowly, step by step, not by just this fast advancement, but what they were doing basically all along, with agreement or without it. So this is about about Iran. Israel is, of course, watching the situation very closely, and I can tell you that in both administrations, Lapid now that is almost over, and Netanyahu, the upcoming government, of course, there are no admirers of the Iranian nuclear deal, and yet the relations with the U.S. are important. They are pivotal. Israel is not only a friend of the U.S. and it's a strategic ally, but it also shares common values, with the U.S. So in this regard, the relations are unique. And I think that again, we are coming back to the expectations of Russia to perhaps to see something different from Netanyahu government. Well, I think that in any case, the strategic relations with the U.S. will always overweight anything that Israel can get, from Russia today. Of course, it will always be able to play on the differences. And for example, one of the issues that can be played out is the Palestinian deal. And we do see the Russians, using more and more, they criticize Israel more. They pledge more support to the Palestinians, but at the same time, they never give. They just promise, but they actually don't give a dime in humanitarian aid or anything else. But they can make a deal of this, especially if we will find ourselves in the Intifada. God forbid, but if it will happen, then we will, of course, will hear the Russians more and more, convening international committees and using their power in UN in order to bring it to the table, and perhaps in this way to make a disarray between Israel and its Arab partners, such as Morocco, for example, because for Moroccans the Palestinian issue is important as well. So this is something that I think we should, brace for and prepare ourselves, because this is something that Russia excels in, using this wild cards and its historical commitments to various issues such as the Palestinian issue, in order to influence and to reach its goals.
Now, to kind of we are heading towards the end of the discussion, but there is a framework that both the Trump administration and Biden administration have considered, which is a kind of Middle Eastern Defense Alliance, and it has not worked out for many different reasons, not the least of them tensions between the US and various members of that would be alliance over China, over airplanes, over Iran, and so forth. Do you see this current engagement, ironically, this um, U.S. call for cooperation on the Ukraine issue as bringing these countries closer together and potentially facilitating some semblance of that alliance in a more practical way.
Well, sometimes things develop in the organic way, and this is actually much better than some frame that has been invented and presented by some external power. I do not believe in Middle Eastern NATO for this matter.
Mhm.
I think that the differences between the countries are still significant. You have the Palestinian issue, of course. Some countries are reluctant to directly work, on strategic issues with Israel in the open. They do it secretively, but they are not prepared at this stage, at least, to take it further. So I think the ties will develop and the exchange of intelligence information, some common drills. We will see more and more of that. Indeed, we see it now. And this is, of course, encouraged by the US and supported by the US, which is very important. But it also develops organically from within, from the need of all of these regional countries to, at the end of the day, to prepare itself for the worst and to create. Maybe it's not. It can be called a front or some defense organization. It will never mature to that, perhaps, but the country to country and also multilateral cooperation within the frame of US-led military drills and so on. I think this is for now. It's good enough. We will see a growth and development of these trends in the near future.
Now, Morocco has prioritized the physical opening of the Dakhla consulate that the U.S. has promised when it recognized the Moroccanness of Sahara. But so far, that has not materialized, and there has been no clear communication from the White House when that is going to happen. However, do you think this latest development could be part of a negotiation of that process? Do you see a physical opening looming in the near future, or some other meaningful elevation of open public relations between Morocco and Washington?
Well, I think that in the Middle East, you really have to be patient, first of all. Yes, there is this wonderful proverb in Arabic, al-sabr khair. The patience, it's the best thing that you can have. And this is indeed right also for our relations with Morocco, as we are still waiting for officially for the opening of the embassy of Morocco here. We have an office, but it's been now over 2 years, and it still did not develop. I think that we will get there someday, just as the Americans and the Moroccans will get there someday. But you cannot rush these things. It will have to happen in its own pace and when the time is right.
Finally, you hinted at the fact that some other countries might be joining this move initiated by the US to provide T-72 and other parts to Ukraine. Do we know if it's anyone in particular, or is it just a tendency that's simply likely to happen?
No, I don't. I cannot tell you names of the countries that I think that they might be next. Also, yeah, I know that there are negotiations with few of these countries, especially with those who have spare parts, and you know it very well which countries in the Arab Middle East have the spare parts for their tanks, for example, the Soviet tanks and so on. It's, let's say, not the Arab Gulf countries. Okay, it's the
I would guess some of those countries might be waiting for the lifting of the military aid freeze from the United
For
States.
example, yes, for example. But I think that the example of Morocco clearly shows that it's not something that is unimaginable. I
Mhm,
mean, under certain terms, it can happen.
mhm.
And the more times goes by, I think that the more the country in the world and also in MENA region understand that US is not going away from that. It's not dumping Ukraine. It's not turning its back to Ukraine. And the Ukrainian issue is important enough to basically promote relations to the next level or to downgrade them also.
Mhm. Well, that is an encouraging outlook. I'm glad to see that diplomacy is finally being used effectively, and that something constructive is happening as a result.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was
Thank you.
fantastic, and I hope that in the future we'll get to discuss the advancements after these current developments. For those watching the program, we just had Ksenia Svetlova discuss the latest developments on defense on Morocco being the first African country, the first Arab country to provide military aid to Ukraine. Hopefully, we'll see a lot more of that in the near future. My name is Irina Zuckerman. For those who just watched this program for the first time, we'll be back. The Washington Outsider Report. We'll be back next week, Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. as usual. Please tune in. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.